Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast. I'm Christian Harris and I'm joined today by Ian Davies. Ian is a very experienced professional in the risk management field, currently working in the pharmaceutical industry. And we have a really interesting chat about some of the big trends around ESG, sustainability in particular, thinking about things like risk management being a double-sided coin. So yes, there are risks of things going wrong, but there are also opportunities for growth and expansion and things to improve over time as well. We talk a lot about sustainability, drawing some parallels between what's happened with COVID and what needs to happen with sustainability and the environment to prevent the crisis that's happening in the moment. And that's particularly interesting, obviously, in the context of the COP conference going on. And we delve quite deeply into Ian's COVID journey, working in the industry of pharmaceuticals, and therefore the kind of responsibility that he and his colleagues felt to be advocating for the vaccines and explaining how these vaccines were indeed done, approved in the proper way and through the proper processes, and how that all works. How to communicate with teams to get that message across, and also to families of team members as well. And then some of the challenges around supply chains and flights into countries which normally would be on commercial airlines, but clearly that wasn't happening anymore, and a raft of other things as well. I got some great value from this chat, and I'm sure that you will too. So let's get on with it then and join my conversation with Ian. Cheers. Welcome to the podcast, Ian.
Thank you, Christian. Glad to be here. Nice to speak to you.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I haven't ever had anybody from your kind of sector on before. So some unique risks, but also interesting challenges and opportunities over the last couple of years for people in your sector.
Oh, it certainly has been. Kind of Brexit and COVID has sort of been the pinnacle of my career, I guess.
Yeah.
Enterprise risk management is what it's all been building to for the last 30 odd years. So
yeah. You sort of, and then there's going to be some economic turbulence maybe, and who knows what else happening. But you don't get many sort of inflection points as strong as those two coming together at the same time, I suppose.
Absolutely not. So it's been a bit of a challenge. I'm glad to say we got through it. There's a lot more turbulence to come. As you know, as most people out there know, supply chains have been put under pressure. The transport of goods around the world is not what it was before the pandemic, and we're kind of reaping the rewards. Obviously, labour shortages in the supply industry is taking its toll.
Yeah. Lots of perfect storms all arising at the same time. Never fun. Do you want to start, Ian, by just giving a bit of background in terms of your kind of career and how you got to the role you're in, and then I suppose what the role is and what you're looking at.
So yeah, I started with the health and safety executive back in the day. I investigated the King's Cross fire back in the 80s. That was one of my first things. Then there was a royal inquiry into that, which I got fairly bored with, and moved into industry. And I moved into industry basically as a process safety chemist, and process safety with a large pharmaceutical manufacturer.
Yeah.
Did an MSc in process safety and chemical engineering. Wrote one of the first COMA reports around fires in warehouses and the environmental effects of fire in warehouses, because that was just after, the younger listeners will not remember this, but some of the older ones might, the Sandoz fire in Basel in Switzerland, which polluted the Rhine for quite a number of miles and turned it various colours of purple and red. So yeah, COMA reports. And then I moved into fast moving consumer goods, where I had responsibility for 47 sites worldwide. and then now I've moved back into the pharmaceutical industry with a company called BTG. So and we make very niche chemical, very niche antibodies and emergency medicines for various things. So yeah, and I've been with the group for about 10 years, and during that, well, back in the fast moving consumer goods days, I took up responsibility for risk management in its entirety, including insurance,
Yep.
and supply chain issues.
Yeah. So starting from pure safety, moving through to that broader, all-encompassing risk management agenda, which means that there's a lot of fires to fight.
Yeah, well, you know, I think the important thing about risk management is it's got two sides of the coin. It's minimizing the probability of anything going wrong and attacking that, but also maximizing the probability of opportunities. And although typically risk management is all about what can go wrong, it should also be about what opportunities are out there and how you're going to make the most of those opportunities, particularly when you get into the sustainability field. And you know, we're sitting here on the first Friday of COP26, so you know, looking forward to the future. Things are going to change rapidly, and we've all got to decide what our future agenda looks like and how we're going to fit in with the demands of a world that's changing very rapidly. And if we don't do anything about it, you know, life for our kids won't be the life that we've lived. So
no. Yeah, you're right. I'm glad you brought those 2 points up. I mean, I think the double-sided coin of risk management is something that I'm really passionate about, because I think that, as you say, too often people think of the negative side of things and not the fact that actually, you know, if we never took a risk, then we'd never grow and we'd never achieve anything in life, and so on and so forth. And then I think, yeah, particularly the sustainability and the environmental piece is really, really critical. I think, again, there's the two sides to that, isn't there? Because I can see that we've got to reduce the risk of things continuing the way they are, but also I think there is a big opportunity to refocus, and there's a really interesting opportunity around the younger generation who are, you know, really, really passionate about this stuff and really attuned to it. And actually, I think, you know, to build a workforce and a customer base and fans and things, you're going to have to be, as a business, aligned with these objectives. Otherwise, a lot of people are just going to be totally turned off, I guess.
Well, I think there's two things there. I mean, number one, sustainability as a company means that you have to make a profit, right? Because everybody needs to understand that.
Yeah.
And then number two is as leaders, are you in it? What are you in it for the long term, or are you in it for the short term? Because sometimes, and you know, me and you are old enough to remember banking crises and various things from the early 2000s. You know, that very much was driven by people and the culture of taking short-term gains at the expense of the long-term business future of whole banks in a lot of cases. And of course, they had to be then bailed out by governments. So yeah, the whole point is, you know, what is your view as a company and as leaders of the future, and what is the future you're building towards?
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I think that it's easier, or almost, as it is for many things in life, it's a bit easier if you're a smaller company, A, to get that cultural change if one's needed, but B, to avoid that kind of short-termist view. Because if you're the CEO or the CFO of a PLC, you know, your incentivization is based on the share price over the next sort of year or two, isn't it? And so you know, there's a sort of slightly perverse kind of reason to do things that are a bit more short term than long term, maybe.
And that's when what you have to realise as a board, boards, in particular in the PLC sector, but you have to look at how are you incentivising these people? At our company, we've had long-term incentive plans ever since I've arrived, and it's not about the next year, but it's about the next 3 to 5 years, and those and what you see in terms of growth of the company in that time. And the bigger the business, and the more critical it is to the society in which we live in, like banks, like large supermarkets, need to look at that over a much longer period. If you look at some of the big consumer brands now, they're talking about 2030, 2050, and how they're going to go green, etc., and what they're going to do. And that will, and you can see it in a lot of cases. Some of the products that we used to buy are being taken off the shelves because they're not green anymore, and people know it. So, and these big companies are looking in that kind of time frame.
Yeah. Is that kind of discussion then about incentivization and moving towards a more of a long-term incentive structure? Should that be something that somebody with the risk management responsibility is really getting heavily involved in and putting that case together that this is the way we should be doing it for these reasons?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to, but it shouldn't be just the risk managers. It should be everybody in leadership roles, and I think lots of us, dare I say it, are a little bit guilty over what we've seen happen to the planet, and particularly it's probably particularly easier in the pharmaceutical / chemical industries, because we are scientists. We are engineers. We do go by the scientific method. So we look at the evidence, and we look at the evidence produced by the experts. And we're not experts, but we are imbued in that scientific method. We know you produce things in peer-reviewed journals because everybody then looks at it and goes, yeah, this is right, or goes away and goes, it can't be right because we can't reproduce your results. So that's an important thing. But because we're imbued in that, it's easier, I think, to talk about this in the world of chemicals and pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. And has your view on this kind of stuff changed over time as you become more experienced and more had more exposure to different industries and how everything works?
Well, yes. Specifically, I mean, it was only when I first graduated, it would just come through the ozone hole crisis, which, again, older listeners might remember, which was caused by CFC, chlorofluorocarbons, and it was taken out of things like aerosols at the time. So my final year dissertation was on atmospheric chemistry and the fate of nitrogen oxides in the atmosphere. So that was one of the things that I left college with. But a lot of the things we didn't realise at the time. The environmental harms we were doing. Example, lead in petrol.
Yeah.
But the science moves on, and we realise what's happening, and people like me, yes, have been more accepting of the experts over the last 20 years, and we have been doing. We've been gradually looking for cleaner chemistry. We've been looking for more energy efficient ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies have made big strides, but it's not enough, and we've got to get quicker and faster.
Yeah.
I think if you sort of take the lead from COVID, it's amazing what we can do when we all get together, cooperate, put the money up front. If we have that philosophy as a world, and then bring it to face climate change, I think there's hope, and I think there's really good lessons in what's been happening about the COVID vaccine, how things were done on a worldwide scale, and there was cooperation rather than pure wealth chasing, if I can use that term.
No, that does make sense, and you're right. It'd be interesting to think what would happen if if there was some kind of environmental emergency that had the same effect as COVID in terms of having to shut down everything. That would sharpen people's focus, wouldn't it, a lot more than perhaps what we're seeing at the moment.
Well, I would encourage people to look at the IPCC models. They came out last month. The prediction of where the seas are going to be between now and 2030 is on there if we don't change. I mean, places like Brussels will be by the sea, Cambridge will be by the sea if we don't change. And most importantly, if you look at northern Germany, and for a lot of supply chains in the chemical / pharmaceutical area, northern Germany around Bremerhaven and Hamburg, where a lot of big chemical manufacturing is also going to be flooded. So it is, if we don't do anything, there will be a time where it is declared a climate emergency similar to the pandemic. And the issue is, are we going to get together and do cooperate before that happens and stop it happening, or is it going to take that emergency to get people's mind focused to that point?
What are you seeing in your industry in terms of kind of that spirit of cooperation that we fostered in COVID, and maybe moving that towards the ESG kind of agenda, in terms of things like supply chain and moving goods around and that kind of thing? Do you feel as if that spirit of cooperation is going to persist?
I think it is, and I also think one of the big things about COVID is it changed the relationship when bringing new pharmaceuticals to the market, because instead of going through a whole clinical trial and then a set of clinical trials, which is normally 1 to 4, we went through the clinical trials for the vaccines and released them at each stage to the authorities. So instead of having 5 years worth of trials and then giving the results at the end of that, and then the authorities then looking at those, they were brought on at every single stage. And of course there was other things like governments prepaid for those doses. So instead of us having to go to the market and finance those clinical trials, which are very, very expensive, we had the money up front, or the industry had the money up front, not specifically my company. So that enabled that. The other thing is, if you bringing a cure or a vaccine to market, it does help when there is a global pandemic, because you've got a ready supply of patients,
captive audience,
which you haven't normally. And I spent a lot of time explaining how and why these things came to market, both internally and with my family and friends who all get fed up with me banging this drum. But I see so much anti-vax and falsehoods out there. These vaccines have gone through exactly the same testing mechanism as everything did in the last 10, 20 years, since we've had the regulations that these vaccines came under. So although it was quick because of the focus,
And the investment,
collaboration, the money up front, and as I say, a massive supply of patients, which you don't usually get.
No. Yeah, I imagine. Again, it just sharpened the mind, didn't it? And everybody was pulling in the same direction, and I guess as well that most other things just stopped in the likes of AstraZeneca. I imagine they just, all of their resources were directed at this, I guess.
Well, I can't answer for AstraZeneca,
No,
but I'm sure a lot of resources were refocused in just about every pharmaceutical company all over the world. But you still got to remember, we still make other life-saving drugs, and we still had to keep our factories open.
Yeah,
we hadn't got the luxury of sending our people home from our factories, because if we did, then the life-saving drugs that we were making in other senses would have stopped too, and of course that would have been equally as uncomfortable as the pandemic.
Yes, the world didn't stop. It did in many ways, but obviously it didn't stop in lots of other really important ways as well.
Yeah, and likewise, we suddenly realised the importance of lorry drivers to the supermarkets, the importance of big men emptying out bins, etc.
Cleaners,
So yeah, I'd say none of them could go home. None of the supermarket workers could say, "Oh well, I'm going to work from home today." So I think it brought into focus. Hopefully, it's brought into focus what's really important. I think I worry that lesson is even starting to be forgotten now, but I will do my best to keep reminding people.
Yeah. And what were some of the challenges that you had in terms of that communication piece then around, the vaccines, and around staying open, and around the safety measures you were taking, and just kind of keeping your staff and your workforce engaged and feeling safe and confident at carrying on, coming into work?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we engaged a crisis management team of senior leaders very early on. I think it was mid-February when we realised this was going to go. One of our first challenges was securing enough PPE for our people, because we used the same PPE that was used in hospitals to make. The focus in our factories is to protect the product from the people. But it's the same sort of PPE. So we worked hard in the early days to procure enough of that and keep us going. In the early days, we were looking at how to schedule our production, because we were planning for 20% of our people to be off at any one time. Now, due to our people being very, very careful, adopting all the safe practices, and I've got to say they must have done a lot of it at home as well, because we never ever reached those numbers across the board. It was always about 5%, 6%. So the worst case scenarios where we would have had to reschedule and slow down production never really occurred. So those were the early days. In the sort of midterm, because a lot of our products were all travel on commercial airlines. Of course, commercial airlines all closed down. So we had to switch to cargo planes. And different routes, particularly out of our Australian site. The local airport was only being used for internal Australian flights. The international flights were shut down, so we had to move. And every time you move something or change something in the pharmaceutical industry, you have to go through what we call revalidation, so making sure that the product isn't harmed by the change. So
did you have to ship then in and out of Australia, or?
No, we always use planes, because our products generally are temperature controlled.
Okay.
and putting them on, putting temperature controls. We have experimented with ships before, prior to this. I also have to say that our BTG board in previous years were always very, very keen that we were never off the market. So all the things that we did for Brexit and various other planning where we had strategic stocks in various places in the production line stood us in good stead. So if we did have to slow down, we had got some strategic backup, and that took us back almost 10 years to develop where we got to for Brexit and COVID. So, but that's a big challenge, because when you've got strategic stocks, they're on the books, and accountants don't like that. But
Yes.
So that was a challenge that we've been addressing for the last 10 years, and we've never gone to that just in time philosophy, partly because we couldn't due to the production process, and partly because we wanted to be resilient, and all of that thinking, as I said, did come up trumps for the COVID response. In terms of trying to explain, we brought on the best minds we had in the company. We have doctors, we have various experts. We brought all that to bear. One of the challenges were the changing nature of government advice. That was a real challenge, trying to cut through. We adopted very, very early on, we will be safe. We will try and keep our people safe. And we had mask wearing, temperature controls at the gate, all of these things. Everybody that came on site, whether they were an employee or a contractor, had to attest that they hadn't been in contact, that they didn't have any symptoms. As I say, we tested their temperature, etc. So we came through that, and then as I said, we did weekly comms early on. Then it moved out to sort of monthly and 2 monthly. Tried to cut through the changing advice and going, we will be ultra cautious if in terms of keeping our people safe. A lot of our people are in the US, and we're in contact with healthcare professionals in hospitals. They had to change to online very, very quickly. Luckily, we're a global business. We've always operated online. We had the tools to do our daily business anyway. Things like Team and Zoom, etc., were already in place. So that was okay. But there was a cultural shift that the people that were liaising with the healthcare professionals took up very, very quickly, and they did a great job. And our sales did hold up for that year, so which was good. Although the product mix, what we sold, did change. But overall, we did a really good job. And of course, being a pharmaceutical company, believing in what we do, because our products go through exactly the same testing regime as the vaccines did. We thought it was important to fly the flag and do as much as we could to get over the myths that were being put up on Facebook, and we tried to give all our people the knowledge in the first place, but also the confidence to go and challenge it if they heard it in their families and in their circle of friends.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's still quite a big chunk of people that haven't been vaccinated, and it's a shame, because I think that those last 5 million or whatever would make a big difference to what's going on still at the moment, I'm sure.
Yeah, I can only endorse that comment. So, if there is anybody out there that hasn't been vaccinated, I would encourage them to go and do it. If you look at the statistics of who's in hospital at the moment, it is, I think, the last time I looked, it was 80% of people in hospital either hadn't been fully vaccinated or weren't vaccinated at all. So.
Yeah, and I've just this week actually I met up with a friend and customer, and his wife was pregnant, and so decided not to have the vaccine, and she got COVID, and their baby arrived something like, I think it was 12 weeks early or something like that, with COVID and with lots of, and therefore, because it was born so early, lots of other complications, and they were, I think the doctors were worried that the baby wasn't going to survive, but it has, but still not out of the woods as such, and who knows about the long-term issues. So
yeah, I mean, in particular in that case, I mean, people were, even developers were unsure about giving the vaccines in the early days to pregnant women. But if you see now, again, lots of pregnant women are ending up in hospital, and if they do take the vaccines, it does protect them. So, but that was part of the tapestry that was COVID.
Yeah,
I think information was coming in at a very rapid rate of knots. Science and the scientific community, and that not just the companies, obviously researchers in universities all over the world, etc. We're learning a lot very, very, very quickly. So, but these people are experts. They don't just put things out without reference to their peers, and that's important. So when people are reading things on Facebook, the question to ask is, did it appear in a peer-reviewed scientific journal?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, you should be very, very skeptical of
it. Yeah. Good old fake news, changing the world for the worse, I'm afraid. But
well, I can't remember which philosopher said it, but falsehoods go around the world in a flash before the truth has even got its shoes on.
There you
go. I'll let you give credit to that quote after this talk, because I don't remember who said it. But
I'll have to dig it out and see. I was listening to. I'm quite a big fan of podcasts, and one of my pastimes that I really love is snooker. And there's a snooker podcast that's on, and Barry Hearn was interviewed, and he started quoting some philosophers, and I thought, wow, Barry Hearn quoting philosophers on a snooker podcast. What's happening? Now we've got philosophy on a safety and risk podcast, but that's all good, because actually whatever gets the message across is interesting. And as you said, it's about communication. A lot of this stuff, isn't it?
It's about trustworthy communications and working hard. One of my colleagues in communications put up a slide in one of our management meetings, and it was quite eye-opening, because it said more people trust their employers than they do media or their governments.
Yeah.
So as leaders, as employers, it's very, very important for us to go out there and do our best to communicate with our people, and get the best communication we can, and truthful, scientific based communication, and the truth out there, because there are forces out there that don't want the truth to be heard, as we all know.
Yes, absolutely. Great. Well, Ian, really enjoyed our chat. Thank you very much. I didn't know if there's any LinkedIn's or things you wanted to share so people could can follow and get in touch with you if they want to have a chat further?
I'm on LinkedIn. If anybody feels that they'd like to chat, I'm more than happy. If they want to contact me over LinkedIn, more than happy to talk to people and further the cause. And I'm at that stage of life where, you know, mentoring and bringing people on and developing other people's careers is what I'm interested in. So yeah, more than happy to talk to anybody. I'm sure when very happy for when the podcast goes out, you to put my LinkedIn profile up, and they can contact me whenever feel if they want to. And yeah, thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks, Ian, and thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you again next week.